Okay, so we've seen how loops work with lists, right? We've done some loops. We've seen them work with lists. Great. And we have this for each loop that just allows us to go through all the lists. And we loop through each and every element in the list. That's great, but what if I don't have a list? If I don't have a list, how do I loop through? For example, let's say I want to talk about, by the way, our topic here is range, and we'll talk about range in a second. But I want to print I love San Diego. And I want to print that 100 times because I like my spam. So 100 times, I want to print that on my screen, or maybe 1,000 times. But I don't have a list. And so how do I run this without a list? How am I going to print this 100 times? And there's something called a range. It's actually a function called range. And there's a couple versions of it. And so we have range. And let's just go right to the code. For n in range of 100. And what this is going to do, it's going to generate a list of 100 values. So this is going to be a list from 0 to 99. That's 100 values. So let's just print it out. And there it goes. There's the 99. There's the 0. And so it fills in n every single time with basically the numbers in the range. And then if I print the range, it doesn't look like it. I mean, we're going to do this. We're going to look at it a little bit later, but yeah, you really don't see a list there. We'll talk more about range in a minute, but let's actually go back to our example. I wanted to print, I didn't want to print the number. I wanted to print, I love San Diego. So if we do a for n in range 100, and then I print, and I want to print the iteration number just because I want to see it. So I have to convert it to a string so I can concatenate. I love San Diego. And now when I run this, I really should see 100 I love San Diegos. And we did. There's 99 right there. And we go all the way back to the top. We start 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way. So we printed out 100 times. For those of you who had to write in school, you know, I will not talk while the teacher's talking. Well, now you know how to do that really fast if you have to write that. If you want to use a variable in the loop, you do need to assign a variable before the loop. However, this variable is actually being assigned in the middle of the loop. So you don't have to define this one first. But if you want to use, for example, counts for C, you have to define it before the loop. Otherwise, you would reset the loop to C equals 0 every time, and it wouldn't go anywhere. It would just C equals 0, C plus 1, C equals 0, C plus 1. So it has to be declared before the loop. Except for n does not. In fact, if you have a variable called n before this loop, you will now lose its value and become 0 through 99. And at the end of this, n is now 99. And I said range was a list, but if you type range, you don't get a list. You just get this thing called range printed out. And look what it says, though. It says range 0 to 100. So really, there's actually multiple versions of range. When you write range 100, what you're really writing is range 0 to 100. That's what that means. So you can write this in two ways. This is the start, and we can call it an index. And it's inclusive, meaning it's included. This is the end, and we'll call it an index as well. And we'll call that exclusive. I mean, it may not be, may consider it a value, but we're just going to use the word index for now. So it has a start index or value. So the 100 is not included, but the 0 is. And so it goes from 0 to 99. But this does not look like a list. It just doesn't look like a list to us. So how can we make it look like a list? And there's another function in Python called list. And if we pass the range to this function, it's going to turn the range into a list. And if you could read all that, it goes from 0. And so now we have a list. You can even see the brackets. It turned our range into a list. That's obviously an excessive amount of numbers. Let's go a smaller set of numbers just so we can tell. So it went from 0 to 99 up here. Now I set range 10 and went from 0 to 9. And so when we have a range in a for loop, when we have this range in this for loop, it's iterating through each of the numbers in this list one at a time. And we could also provide a start index. Remember, I said this is literally the same thing. So range 10 and range 0 to 10 gave us the same exact answers, 0 to 9. We don't have to start at 0, though. We can start counting at 3. And now it goes from 3 to 9. Again, 10 is not included, but the 3 is. We could also do negative numbers. -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way to 9. So we can put any numbers we want in there. What happens, though, if we put a number that's larger before? Any idea what's going to happen here? If I have a bigger number on the left and the right, is it going to do anything? Yeah, empty list. It's because it's starting at 30 and then the 10 isn't there. And so it just stops. Oh, can't go, nothing there. Can't go any further. Same thing, by the way, would have happened if you did 30, 30. It just ends because 30 is not included on the right-hand side, even though it's on the left-hand side. So it makes it not included. It just stops. Now, there's another way to write a range. At the moment, we're just writing 2 numbers. There's a third number we can put in there. And the first number we said was the start. The second number we said was the end. The third number is called the step. And what the step does, if I use 0 to 30 by 3s, it's really going to count by 3s. So 0 plus 3, 3 plus 3, 6 plus 3, 9, all the way to 27. Why didn't we get to 30? Remember, we don't include the last number. If you really want the 30, then you have to go larger than 30. But the step allows us to skip over numbers, right? So we can skip, we can count by 1s. In fact, the default is counting by 1s. Count by 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s. What if you want to just count by 5? You make your step 5. So we can change how we step through it based off of that step number, that third number, which is optional. You don't have to do it. If you don't put the step in there, you default to 1. So let's actually write a loop to print out only even numbers. And let's see, I don't want to mess with that one. Let's turn that away. Oh, this is pretty easy to do. Let's do for num in range. I only want even numbers, but if I do 100, what if I want 100? If I put 100 in there, it's actually not going to print 100. It's going to go from 0 to 98. So if I want the 100, I have to make this higher than 100, make it 101. And make my step 2 is going to give me even numbers, 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, all the way up to 99, 98. And now it'll go up to 100 if I set it to 101. And we just print out the number. And now we're going to get 0 all the way to 100 by 2s. Notice it started with 0 and just went up by 2s. If I did the same thing with 1, it'll print out all the odd numbers. Although now it's not going to print 101. It'll actually go from 1 to 99, right? So now it's going 1 by 2s all the way to 99 by 2s. So depending on how we start and how we stop, or how we start and where we stop, we can change the step to get there either by 2s, by 3s, by 5s, by 10s, if you want to loop, count through 10s. So that's what we get now with this range thing. We can now loop through ranges. Python only supports for loops with lists. So if we want to do a specific kind of number, then, for example, I want to print out 100 times, then we have to use a range.